If you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am the Wiz! And I'm here today to review the 1986 sci-fi film Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, starring, the usual cast, and Catherine Hicks, directed by Leonard Nimoy. So I'm not even going to go into like a pre-review thing here. I'm just going to go in just saying what the movie is about. Living in exile on the planet Vulcan, the ragtag former crew of the USS Enterprise steal a starship after receiving a planetary distress call from Earth, which is a space probe has entered its orbit around Earth, disabling global power on the planet and evaporating the oceans. Captain Kirk, Spock, and the rest of the officers travel back in time to retrieve non-extinct humpback whales, which Spock has deduced will communicate with the probe and send it away from Earth. Okay, now do you see why I decided to forego my pre-talk on the review? So the first thing I have to point out is that the premise is goofy and ridiculous. I know it's sci-fi, so let's get past that, but what in the last three movies would you actually deduce by saying that, okay, so this is something that I would expect from a Star Trek story. They come back in time to capture some whales to talk to aliens. What? Wait, hold up. So, on the face of it, it is so goofy and ridiculous that it's kind of like, what are they thinking? And yet, it works because it doesn't take itself seriously in the slightest. This is actually a pretty goofy and funny type of movie that is charming and it is funny, but it's funny because it's obviously not taking itself seriously in the slightest. There are many funny, not that there are like really laugh out loud hilarious things going on in the movie, but it's in that cute tongue-in-cheek way where it's like, oh, okay, they're not taking themselves that seriously, so you can just turn your brain off and just have a good time. Like, there's some examples, like, when they first get into, like, San Francisco in the movie, you would think that there would be some culture shock or people would think they're crazy, but, again, it's not taken seriously at all, so it kind of not that it makes sense, but it's kind of like in the spirit of the film where we're not taking it too seriously, we're not thinking too deeply about it, because, let's face it, if they came from the future and they were able to detect that, the government would probably take them away and shoot them or put them on a black site or something. So I guess that's good that they didn't do that in this movie, because who would want to see Captain Kirk in a black site? That would not be interesting at all. Actually, that kind of would be. So, yeah, I think the overall tone of the film, the way that it treats the entire story, it is funny. And because it's not taken seriously at all, you can do other kind of ridiculous things in the movie, and you just go with it. Like, for example, Spock, when he's in San Francisco, has a headband over his head covering his ears, and it just looks so weird. But everyone's like, oh, yeah, that's the fashion these days, I guess. I'm like, what? It's like, what is this? So, I had a good time with this movie, I'm not going to lie. I thought this was cute and kind of funny. But what I will say is I still would have preferred a movie like the last two over this. As much as I had a good time, I am a little bit disappointed that this wasn't something along the lines of 2 and 3. Because I was really expecting this to be a little more serious and to have a little more intrigue and drama. But there was none of that in this movie. It's all about saving two whales to save the Earth and to actually just tell a different story. This is very much an activism movie, it feels like, and I do find that a little odd, but I'll get into that in the footnotes. Speaking of, let's get into it. Let's get into the footnotes for Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. And my first point is basically this. If this movie was made today, it would be considered woke. Now, God, man, I hate that word. I think I know what it originally means. It means you're clued in on social issues or issues regarding certain injustices. That's what woke used to mean. Now, it's honestly a catch-all term now for bad writing that's sanctimonious and is focused entirely on the message, I guess is what they would call it. With that, I would have a question with those who would consider that Star Trek is too woke now, and don't like it now, and the question is, did you like this movie? Because if you did, then I have to understand how you're squaring that circle there, because this movie is very much about its message in a great degree, and I'll get into one of the things they do in this movie that kind of surprised me, but I really wonder what people would think about that with this movie specifically. Would this be too woke for you now? Let me know in the comments. And my second point, so what would a Trekkie purist consider a proper Star Trek story? With a lot of other films, with a lot of other film series or a lot of other stories, there's always a group of people who consider themselves purists, that the story has to be a certain way for it to be that story. An example would be, I think a Star Wars purist would balk at a Star Wars movie that was a romantic comedy. Or let's say, like a Lord of the Rings purist would consider it being a very gory, very disturbing type of film to be not what they would consider a Lord of the Rings movie. I guess this kind of fits with number one, too. So I guess if you're in the comments, let me know if you are a Star Trek purist, what would you consider to be a Star Trek movie? Because this movie works, which then gives me the question of, so what exactly is a Star Trek story? Because I would think that something like this, as goofy and as message-laden as it is, I would say would probably piss off some Star Trek fans. But I'm looking at the reviews right now, and it seems like they like this. So sound off in the comments. And just bear in mind, you're talking to somebody who hasn't watched any of the TV shows. So bear that in mind if you say, oh, you don't know, you obviously don't know what Star Trek is. Yeah, obviously. I know that. So save that comment at least. So what to you is an actual Star Trek story if you are a Star Trek purist? Let me know. And my third footnote, I got more footnotes in here than points. So Sulu was born in San Francisco? Not exactly subtle, are they? I think you know what I'm trying to say here. So I thought that was kind of funny. When Sulu said, I was born there, I'm like, huh. It's like, okay. Sure. I don't know if the K was out around that time. Again, I'm a Star Trek newbie, but I think that's not so subtle there. Or maybe it was just like coincidental or something, so I don't know. And my fourth footnote. Whose idea was it to show whales getting slaughtered? Okay, so there is a point in the movie where they are at the whale emporium, or I think it's like a museum of sorts, where they're showing videos of literally whales getting slaughtered by whalers, getting cut open, getting impaled. And I'm like, what the hell? It's like, that's a little extreme, isn't it? Like, literally, they're getting cut open in this scene. So I was kind of like, whoa, okay. So if that doesn't tell you this is a message movie, I don't know what else will tell you that. So overall, surprisingly, I'm going to recommend Star Trek for the Voyage Home. This is very different from the last three. It's a lot more goofier. It's funnier in some spots. It's really not to be taken seriously. But I thought it was a good time. Would I have preferred the movie to be more like the last two I watched? Yes, absolutely. I would have definitely preferred that. I ended up enjoying this movie despite it, and I thought that this was a fun, good time. So overall, I'm going to recommend Star Trek for the Voyage Home. It's on Paramount Plus, blah, blah, blah. If you know where to go, you know where to go to get that. So there you go. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple of days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you like what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.